I see you have a rash on your arm. When did it first show up?
I don't know. The rash comes and goes.
So how long has it been coming and going?
Several months, maybe 4.
What do you think it's from?
I wish I knew.
What do you do for work?
I work for an implement dealership that sells tractors and big field sprayers. I'm a mechanic and I service both growers and custom applicators.
Like crop dusters? You're an airplane mechanic?
No. I work on ground sprayers.
Does the rash typically show up before or after you work on these rigs?
After. Sometimes the day after later, and other times just a few hours after I work on the rigs.
Do you only get the rash on your arm, or does it ever appear on your legs or back?
No, I only get this nasty rash right here on my forearms.
Do you think it's from the exposure to the pesticide residue on the equipment?
I never thought of that. Do you think that may be?
Could be. Do you wear protective gear like long-sleeved coveralls, chemical-resistant gloves when you work on the sprayers either in the shop or the field?
Only coveralls when it's cold. Otherwise, a teacher and no. I don't wear gloves.
Does your company require that the sprayers be decontaminated before you work on them?
Decontamination? I wouldn't know. I only work on the equipment when they call me in.
Look, I think you're having a reaction caused by the pesticide exposure from the equipment you work on.
What? Exposure to pesticide is causing the rash? I don't even spray pesticide. I only work in the equipment when they call me in. Can't believe this.
You've got to protect yourself before you work on equipment that has been used to apply pesticides. If you work on it in a farm shop, make sure it's been decontaminated. Whether it's a field or farm repair, protect yourself with PPE and decontaminate yourself and your PPE when you're finished.
Okay.
Did you know that farmers have regulations to protect their own mechanics? Their employees are classified as pesticide handlers and the Federal Worker Protection Standards. You should heed the WPS training and decontamination requirements. Also, when you work on any equipment, find out if it was decontaminated first.
What is worker protection standard? And I don't work for the farmer. I work for an implement dealer. So does the worker protection standards apply to me?
WPS, or Worker Protection Standard, is a federal regulation to protect farm and custom applicator employees. I'm not going to go into detail, but mechanics that are employed by either of those would fall under the regulation. That means they need to be trained on how to reduce pesticide exposure and use PPE. But the Worker Protection Standard doesn't apply to you since you work for an implement dealer. However, the standard and regulations are good management practices you and your boss should consider. You should be wearing PPE to protect yourself from pesticide exposure, not because it's the law, but because it's the smart thing to do.
That sounds reasonable. I'll talk to my boss about getting some spray rig decontamination procedures put in place. I sure don't like this rash, and it could have been worse. There seems to be things we can do to reduce pesticide exposure. I'll get to work on the bus for making spray rig decontamination a priority.
It's a good idea to be proactive. The spray rigs should be decontaminated before they come into the shop and before off-season storage. You need to know your exposure concerns when you get called to do a field repair. Ask to see the pesticide label before working on the equipment and make sure you have all the proper PPE.
Yep, I'll do that from now on. Now, if only this rash will go away, at least I know how to prevent it from happening.
That's right. It's your life and you should take precautions against pesticide exposure. If you don't, you could have bigger problems than this itchy rash.